I want you to tap into a very specific and probably a very uncomfortable memory.
Okay.
Think about the last time you were waiting for something. Something that, felt like it held the keys to your future.
Hmm.
Maybe it was a biopsy result, maybe a job offer, or maybe it was just those three little gray dots on a text message that appear and then vanish and then appear again.
Agony of the buffer symbol.
Yeah,
Maybe.
exactly. It's that feeling of suspended animation. And today, we are diving into a source that suggests that specific agony, that gap between I asked and I received, is actually one of the most dangerous places in our psychology.
It's what you could call the waiting room effect.
Right. And we aren't just talking about patience here. We're talking about what we build while we wait. We're unpacking an article titled, When Moses is Delayed on the Mountain. And it's written by Hannah Nesher from Voice for Israel Ministries.
And just to, set the table here, this isn't some fluffy piece on just hanging in there. Nesher is using a very ancient story.
The golden calf.
The golden calf incident in
Yeah.
Exodus, yeah. She's using it as like a diagnostic tool for modern anxiety. She's basically arguing that how we handle delay reveals our entire theology.
It exposes who or what we actually trust.
Yeah.
So the premise is simple. When the timeline breaks, we break.
Or maybe
Right.
when the timeline breaks, we try to fix it.
And that's where all the trouble starts.
And that's where it begins.
Okay, so let's get into the story. The source anchors us in Exodus 32. To set the scene, the Israelites are camped at the base of Mount Sinai.
They've just been liberated from Egypt. Big miracles, Red Sea parting, the whole works.
The works. And Moses goes up the mountain to get the blueprints for their new society from God. And then he's gone.
And he stays gone.
Days turn into weeks. And down at the bottom of that mountain, the vibe shifts. It goes from expectant to terrified. And this is where the source zooms in on the language the people use. They go to Aaron, who's Moses' brother, and they say, and this is a quote, "As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him."
That phrasing is just so telling, isn't it? This Moses. It's so dismissive.
It feels like a corporate email trying to distance yourself from a failing project regarding this Moses individual.
It is. But Nesher points out that this is actually a predictable psychological response. She uses a fascinating analogy here.
Which is?
Object permanence.
Okay, walk us through that, because I mostly associate that with playing peekaboo with the baby.
That's exactly it. It's a developmental milestone. So when a mother leaves the room, a 6-month-old just screams. Not because they're impatient, but because their brain literally cannot process that the mother still exists if she isn't visible.
Wow.
To the infant, out of sight literally means cease to exist.
So the source is arguing that the Israelites, and by extension us, have a kind of infant faith.
Precisely. The moment the tangible proof of God, or in this case Moses, is removed, the people just assume abandonment. They don't think, oh, Moses is just busy.
They think, we are alone in the desert and we are going to die.
And when you believe you're alone in the desert, you don't just sit there. You panic.
And the source argues that panic is the engine of idolatry.
This is the real pivot point of the article. Because usually when we hear the word idolatry, we think of, primitive superstition.
Yeah, bowing down to statues.
Right. But Nesher offers a definition that is much sharper and frankly, it's much more uncomfortable for someone listening today.
She defines an idol as the work of our own hands.
Right. So it stops being about theology and it starts being about control. An idol is anything you build to self-soothe when you can't control the outcome.
That hits home. Because if I'm waiting on that medical diagnosis, I'm not, building a golden calf in my backyard.
Yeah.
But I might be spending 6 hours on WebMD, or obsessively checking my savings account, or mapping out 17 different contingency plans.
And according to the source, those things act as the very same mechanism. The Israelites said, make us a God who will go before us. They wanted a user interface they could see.
A deity they could touch. And look at the materials they used. This wasn't just some scrap metal.
No, not at all. They used their gold earrings. This represents their wealth, their resources. It was their severance package from Egypt.
So they took their assets
and melted them down to create a counterfeit stability.
So in a modern context, that's us, taking our talent, our network, our money, all our gold, and constructing a fortress that we trust more than we trust the unseen reality.
Because the fortress is visible. You can see the numbers in the bank account. You can hold the degree in your hands. The unseen God that requires a level of object permanence that, quite frankly, most of us just don't have when the pressure is really on.
And the sources, Well, it's pretty brutal about how effective these fortresses we build actually are. There's a section where she contrasts the silent gods with the living God.
It's a stark comparison. The text points out that these idols, these things we build, they have mouths, but they can't speak. They have eyes, but they can't see.
But the part that really stuck with me
Is that they have to be carried.
yes, that image. If you have to carry your god, it's not a god, it's luggage.
It's a burden. If your career is your God, you have to carry that career. You have to prop it up, defend it, feed it. It can't carry you.
And to illustrate this, the source brings in that big showdown on Mount Carmel.
The heavyweight title fight.
Yeah.
Elijah versus the prophets of Baal.
This is one of the most dramatic scenes in the whole text. You've got hundreds of prophets screaming, dancing, even cutting themselves, just doing everything physically possible to get their God to respond.
It's the ultimate workspace performance. They're trying to manipulate the divine through sheer effort.
And then there's Elijah, and he's not stressed at all. He's essentially standing there, roasting them.
The source quotes him. He asks if their God is maybe on the toilet or asleep, or maybe he's away on a trip.
It's hilarious, but there's a tragedy under it.
The tragedy is the silence. Nesher writes, money cannot save us. Relationships cannot save us. When you're in a true existential crisis, a terminal diagnosis, a complete collapse, those things are silent. You can scream at your bank account, but it won't answer back.
It's a mute object.
Exactly.
So we have this tension. We hate waiting, so we build these works of our own hands, but those things ultimately fail. So what happens when we try to force the timeline ourselves? The source calls this pulling a Sarah.
This is where the article shifts from, this epic mountain scene to a very messy domestic drama. And to get it, we have to understand the Hebrew concept of moedim.
Moedim. Okay, break that down for us.
It translates roughly to appointed times. The idea is that God doesn't just have a general intention, he has a specific calendar. And the story of Sarah it's a cautionary tale about what happens when we try to override that calendar.
So, quick refresher for everyone. Sarah and Abraham have a promise from God. They're going to have a son, a legacy, but the timeline is just dragging on.
Years. We're talking decades. They're getting really old.
And Sarah decides that God needs a little help.
She looks at the situation, does the math, and concludes, okay, biologically, this ship has sailed. So she turns to the work of her own hands, in this case, her own strategy. She gives her servant, Hagar, to Abraham to produce an heir.
And here's the nuance that I think is so important. It worked.
It worked. Technically,
Ishmael was born.
She got a result. And this is where the source is very, very sharp. Just because you can force a door open doesn't mean you should walk through it. Nesher argues that by bypassing the appointed time, the moedim, and using human strategy, Sarah birthed the disaster.
The source uses some strong language here. It quotes the text describing Ishmael as a wild donkey of a man.
And Nesher connects that ancient domestic dispute directly to current geopolitical reality. She basically attributes the roots of millennia of conflict in the Middle East to this one specific moment of impatience.
That's a heavy correlation.
It's heavy. But the argument is that when we pull a Sarah, when we force a solution because we can't wait, we create consequences that long outlive us.
It's the difference between a real solution and just a settlement. We settle for Ishmael because we can't bear to wait for Isaac.
Exactly. We settle for the job we hate because we're scared the right one won't come. We settle for the relationship that's just good enough. We force the timeline.
Okay, so we shouldn't force it. We shouldn't build idols. But that brings us to, I think, the hardest question the source poses. What if the delay isn't an accident? What if? What if you are being ghosted on purpose?
This is what she calls the Lazarus paradox.
John 11.
Yeah.
I feel like most people know the Lazarus come out part.
Oh, yeah.
But the timeline is the weird part.
It's deeply disturbing if you look at it closely. Jesus gets word that his dear friend Lazarus is dying. The text is explicit. Jesus loves Lazarus. But when he gets the urgent news, the text says he stayed where he was for 2 more days.
That feels incredibly cold. If you're Mary or Martha, you're waiting by the bedside, watching your brother die. That delay feels like cruelty. It feels like this Jesus has abandoned us.
It does. But the source explains the cultural context here, which changes the entire reading of the story. At that time, in that place, there was a common Jewish belief that the spirit of a person who died hovered near the body for 3 days.
Wait, really? So there was like a 3-day rule?
Essentially, yes. There was a cultural hope of resuscitation or maybe recovery, inside that 3-day window.
Yeah.
If someone woke up on day 2, people might say, oh, he wasn't really dead, it was a coma.
So if Jesus had rushed in and healed him on day 2,
the miracle would have been diluted. Skeptics would have just explained it away.
but Jesus shows up on the 4th day.
When decomposition has already set in, when the smell is there, when all hope, all cultural possibility of recovery was completely gone. The source argues that the delay was necessary to ensure that the glory went to God, not to luck, not to biology.
The source has this line that it floored me. Sometimes the situation has to die completely so the resurrection power is undeniable.
That is a tough pill to swallow. It requires a completely different way of seeing the world.
It suggests that the death of our vision, the death of the career, the relationship, the dream, might actually be a prerequisite for the real thing to happen.
But to see it that way, you need different eyes, which leads us to the next section on sight versus faith. The source leans really heavily on 2 Corinthians 4.18, fixing our eyes on what is unseen.
And it uses the story of Elisha's servant to visualize this.
This is the chariots of fire moment.
Right. So set the scene for us.
Okay, so Elisha the prophet is in a city, and an enemy king sends a massive army to capture him.
Yeah.
Servant wakes up early, goes outside, and sees the city is completely surrounded.
Yeah.
Horses, chariots, soldiers.
This is empirical data. He isn't hallucinating. He is looking at certain death.
Exactly. He runs back to Elisha in a total panic. Alas, my master, what shall we do? He is reacting to the visible reality.
Yeah.
But Elisha, he isn't worried. He's calm.
Which usually makes the panicked person even more angry.
Usually, yeah. But Elisha prays a very strange prayer. He doesn't say, God, send fire down. He doesn't say, God, make them go away. He prays, Lord, open his eyes that he may see.